Hey everybody, it's Brian Asbury, and I just wanted to welcome you to today's episode. If you could, like today's episode, hit that subscribe button, and let's continue to grow the developmentally speaking brand.
Today, my guest is someone who has pretty much trained every top star you could think of. The one, the only, Dr. Tom Prichard. Dr. Tom, how's it going this morning?
Brian, it's going great this morning, man. We got a little rain, but everything's good.
I got a little rain here, too.
Yeah, so we're dealing with it both here, so it's all good.
So, my podcast is strictly about the developmental territories, and there's really nobody better to talk to than yourself, sir. So, how did developmental all come about?
I think it came to the attention of Vince and everybody in the office that they needed to get some in-house training. They had WCW had their power plant, and WWE, WWF at that time didn't have such a system in place. And I believe it was 96, if I'm not mistaken, when I was first approached and asked if I would like to start training people. And he had three guys. It was Akam Albrecht, Mark Henry, and Dwayne Johnson that they wanted to train. So it started from there, and it started in the TV studio, and we weren't sure how it was going to end up. But obviously, now you have the PC and you have a whole system in place that is totally different than it started out being.
Hmm.
So yeah, in the beginning it was just to train the guys, give them a chance to learn how to work on TV, and kind of kept out of the way. And then when they were brought on the main roster, they'd be a lot fresher. So that's how it started out. But as we see, now it's become a whole new brand.
So, how long after it started did they realize that they had something here and that they were going to expand on it?
Well, we started, as I said, with Mark, Occam, and Dwayne, and Dory Funk Jr. came in and started doing the Funkin' Dojos. We talked to Jim Ross, and we came in. We started doing those together, and we're running towns up on the East Coast. So it took about maybe a year, and then Jim Cornette was still up in Stanford, and he wanted to move back to Louisville, and he proposed the idea of having OVW as a developmental territory. So it was about a year, I think, that we'd been up in Stanford exclusively, and then Jimmy wanted to move back home, so he suggested it to JR, and it worked.
How long before you went down to Louisville to work with OVW?
Well, I was in Stanford
Hmm.
for a while, and I would fly back and forth because we had Louisville and we had Cincinnati as our two developmental territories. And I think at the time Memphis might have been somewhere in there working together and sending guys there for Lawler and giving them experience as well. But the official territories were HWA, Heartland Wrestling Association, with Les Thatcher in Cincinnati, and then Louisville with Danny Davis and Jim Cornette. And I would stay in Stanford. I was still on the road, going to the shows, going to TVs. I was doing voiceovers. I had gigs in Stanford as well, and working in talent relations, uh, trying to decipher all the DVDs and videotapes we were getting at that time because people were still sending videotapes and
Hmm.
pictures and tryout stuff to get noticed. So I was there, gosh, from '96 to 2007. Then I got a relief of duty. Then I came back in, or 2004. Then I came back in 2007. That's what it was. So it was a little while uh, that I stayed in Stanford and would go back and forth, fluctuate.
What was the main difference between HWA and OVW at the time?
I think OVW had Jim Cornette,
Hmm.
and he was a lot more involved, and he had videotapes that he wrote on. He made notes for all the guys what they needed to watch, from how to get heat, how to sell as a babyface, tag team matches. specialty matches besides tag team matches, and just examples of the past that you could apply today. And Les Thatcher had his way of doing things in HWA. It wasn't bad at all. But I just think the big difference was having a Jim Cornette and a Danny Davis, and then Les kind of was doing it with by himself in
Hmm.
HWA. Yeah.
So OVW for the longest time was like the place to be. Like it had its own, what's the word I'm looking for here? Like OVW was the mecca for everybody that wanted to get into professional wrestling. And I'm from Southern Indiana, so I got to be around OVW. So I always felt that the way that OVW had ran things, where you could pay to be there or be paid to be there, really got to get a lot more eyes on the talent, so to speak. Just,
I think it did because you had people from WWF coming down at the time, and they would visit OVW and HWA. At the time, in the very beginning, Danny Davis had a building right across the bridge in Indiana. What Jeffersonville,
hmm.
right?
Yep.
Did you go to the old building?
No, I only went to the Shepherdsville
The,
Road one.
okay, well there was it was an old rundown building. Danny paid I don't know how much, maybe $2.50 for rent, whatever it was. He had a great. It was a great building to learn in because it was cold in the wintertime, hot in the summertime, and if you didn't love the business, then you wouldn't last, and
Hmm.
it put you through the paces. Um, and I think that was a huge benefit and trial by fire for anybody who thought they could do this.
Hmm.
Uh, you know, Danny was running, Rip Rogers was running practice, Danny was running practice sometimes, Nick Densmore, Rob Conway, and you're right, it was the place to be. And then we figured out, or the powers that be figured out, that they needed something that looked better just in case Vince wanted to stop by one day and see it, which he did. He came by and saw the Shepherdsville location, which is very, very nice.
Hmm.
Um, but it's climate controlled and it's not like it used to be.
Hmm.
Not saying that's a bad thing. I'm just saying it's a different thing. When you're in that environment and you're sweating and you're trying to make your reputation, your name, uh, it really pushed you. You know, that's where Brock Lesnar learned to do the 450, I think it was, or 450 or 420, the shooting star press.
Hmm.
And he was doing it every night for a while until Jimmy told him, "Hey, stop doing that. Do it on special occasions." So I thought the environment was really, really good for anybody who had a chance to make it in the business because it really showed what you had to go through to get to the top.
I couldn't agree more on that because, like you said, you have to want to be there, not just because you were a former athlete of some other sorts and then you're in a climate controlled area. Everybody that I've spoke to, they've always preferred OVW, FCW versus, like, for their beginning versus NXT because they love, like, whether the dirty, the sweat, the heat, like they felt like they were earning to be there.
Right.
Yeah.
And the idea behind well, at that time was to develop
Hmm.
their personas and their characters and habits and things like this. And when you they had OVW and HWA both had local TVs,
Hmm.
which is good because they weren't being seen nationally or worldwide yet. Uh, Maybe some tape traders would see the OVW show,
Hmm.
but the thing is, once you're exposed, and it's like FCW had, I think the Florida Sports Network or FSN, something like that, and it kind of kept it local. It kept it out of the way, and now you have NXT with the big national show, and it
Hmm.
looks great. but you've exposed those guys already. So once they go to the main roster, they're not new and shiny anymore. They've
Hmm.
they've been seen.
There's really no surprise, like because they're already
Yeah,
there. Yeah.
they've been seen every, I guess, Wednesday night, or
Hmm.
is it Wednesday night? Yeah.
Hmm.
So, or Tuesday night,
Tuesday,
whatever
yeah.
night NXT. Yeah, Tuesday night is whatever night they're on. They got a great looking program,
Hmm.
and and they got great talent. But once you've seen that talent, then they go to the main roster. It's not the same.
Mm-mm. So with the success with OVW at the time, they decided to open Deep South, and then is that when you came back? Was for Deep South?
Yeah. I think it was '07 when I came back, and they were changing things in Deep South, and I still had some allies there who mentioned my name, and got the door was open again.
Deep South is one of the developmental territories that's not talked about a lot. Is there a reason behind that, or is it just because it
I
wasn't around?
No, I don't know if that was a reason or not. I think that it was just a different way of doing things,
Hmm.
and some liked it, some didn't. Some got it, some didn't get it. But I don't really know why. It is part of the history of the developmental system, though,
Hmm.
and they did have a great system. They did a good job, and yeah, some guys come out of there were pretty damn good.
I agree. And then they decided to put all their eggs in one basket and open FCW.
Right. That was again the shift in attitude and the ever changing um, voices and mindset in the office uh, prevailed.
Hmm.
One day they loved it, and the next day they didn't. One day they need this, and next day they need that. Well, you just had that the day before. I know, but we needed this then, and now we need that now. What? So it was just there was a lot of trying to find the right place. I
Hmm.
mean, they've been through HWA, they've been through OVW, they've been through McDonough, Georgia, and Deep South Wrestling. So now they're going to try Florida because Florida seemed like a better destination and better place to lure people to.
Hmm.
And if you had top athletes, that was the idea too. I think it was they were trying to get a better uh, a better type of athlete, I guess, coming through
Hmm.
the system. And they decided to put it all in Florida. It seemed more enticing to people, but they ran into the same thing. You can't force somebody to love this stuff.
Hmm.
You have to have an innate ability to do it. You have to have some instincts about it, and you got to want to do it. I think to be any good at it.
Hmm.
And a lot of times they would send us football players or baseball players or other players from other sports, and who didn't really understand what this was.
Hmm.
And all they had to do was go out there and do a few spots and do a few what do they call it, skits, or stunts, and then they'd be a wrestler. But there's a lot more to it than that. And the guys who got it advanced, and the guys who didn't got canned.
Hmm. It seemed like FCW, out of all of the rest of the developmental territories, was given the models, the football players, the sport, just anything and everything, make it work type
Right.
of attitude.
They sent the Bellas down to us early on in FCW when we were working at a batting cage. We had set the ring up in one of the batting cages. They had this inside facility, and we were still looking for a building. Back then, developmental was done so different.
Hmm.
Steve Kern had to sign a lease, and it was in his name, and we were subsidiary. Easy for me to say. We were something connected with WWE, but it was under Steve's name. I was
Hmm.
getting paid by WWE, but Steve was head of president of FCW. and it just they would send us the guys and gals who they wanted to get trained. And when we try and train them, they weren't used to getting up at a certain time, and they weren't
Hmm.
used to staying there for a certain time. We trained 4 hours a day, and we trained two different classes. One in the morning while the other ones were training at the gym, and then the other guys would leave and come in and train in the ring, and they would go to the gym. So it really takes a lot to do this, and if you've never had to do anything like this, it can be a shock to your system. And I think the Bellas especially got a shock to their system. Nettie Neidhart was there, and she kind of helped them along. Uh, so
Hmm.
I'm sure that tradition still goes on today. I just don't know how far they take it.
Yeah. When I interviewed Steve Kern, he brought up the Bellas, and he's like, he had a conversation with John Laurinaitis. He's like, "What do you want me to do with him?" He said, "Train him." He said, "Okay, Natty, come here."
Yeah,
He'll show
yeah,
up.
pretty much. They made a deal and worked together, and they got obviously they got a lot better Hall of
Hmm.
Famers. So
So as FCW progressed and you guys moved to your building on Dale Mabry, did FCW feel like it was going to be like the best developmental? Like they were, I know it wasn't. It was under John Laurinaitis now, and was this
right.
the vision going forward? Was FCW was going to be everything?
Well, I think that's what they intended because the first time we did a TV there, I remember everybody came down and they popped the champagne at the end of the night, and you know, congratulations, this might even turn into a third brand. So even as far back as the beginning of FCW, they were thinking along the lines of having a third brand for
Hmm.
developmental. Um, my opinion on that would be no, keep it the way it is. So we keep them hidden, and then when you need somebody new and special, you can find them down there, and they would have only been exposed to a certain amount of audience.
Hmm.
Uh, but yeah, I would think when we started it, I wanted it to be the very best. I wanted to continue on, but things happen and people come into power and change their ideas, and you have to. Yeah, you can't argue with success, and you can't argue with progress.
Hmm.
So
I always felt like developmental. You talked about it earlier. You're there to develop. So them working the armories and those those little shows all across Florida really helped talent develop and learn. Because I couldn't imagine the pressure of, okay, you're signed here. We're going to throw you on national television. This is your one shot. Make it or don't.
right.
Like developmental, you've got room to grow, to make mistakes, to learn from it. But when you put a microscope on it, I feel like it would change everything for everybody.
Yeah, it really did, and it does. When you had the opportunity to go work, as you said, the armories or maybe a high school, and go in and try some stuff, try a few things, and get your feet under you.
Hmm.
Um, that is a different way of doing it than, like you said, throwing you on national TV and sink or swim right away. Get some of that stuff under your feet, and when you get on the main roster, you'll be around the pros and you'll be around guys who will either take you under their wing because they see something in you,
Hmm.
or they'll kind of let you fall by the wayside.
Hmm.
And when you go on national TV right away, there's competition everywhere, and it should be competitive. It should be uh, everybody trying to be the best
Hmm.
and being their best on TV, cutting promos in live crowds, smaller crowds, getting that experience that you need before you go out and
Hmm.
you know shit the bed.
I always felt like there was a time period, I want to say like 2002 to 2004. They had a lot of talent, like Brent Albright, the Bashams. Nick Dinsmore, Rob Conway. They had all these people, and they would just throw them, or like right when FCW started too, they would just throw them on TV. 2 weeks didn't work, released.
Right, right. I never understood why. Well, let me take that back. I understood they were looking for talent,
Hmm.
but uh, there is there was a quickness to a quickness. What am I saying? There was this mindset, I guess, that if they didn't make it the first week,
Hmm.
let's get rid of them. Or if they were around the locker room or around the guys in the back and they didn't like them, let's get rid of them. And once Dusty Rhodes came on board and started talking to the guys, I mean, it was a lot different. I think the vibe was different. I worked closer to Dusty during that time in FCW than I ever had, and picked his brain, and he would sit with talent and talk to them about what they needed to do to get on the main roster and to be successful, and the pitfalls, uh, some of those bumps in the road that you'll hit a little too hard. He would
Hmm.
explain how to navigate that, and that was part of the key of FCW. Once you got to the main roster, you had to learn how to navigate all the potholes and things that we could all fall into, and some guys would never get out of.
Hmm.
Uh, but the guys who made it and guys who got it, like Roman Reigns or Seth Rollins, they were always. It was always good to see. It was a pleasure to see
Hmm.
uh, them become successful.
When they started, rumblings of developing NXT, how did everybody feel about that?
Well, I tell you, that was during the time when the administration was changing,
Hmm.
and I was released right before they went to the PC. But NXT was coming about, and that was when they had I think it was on TV,
Hmm.
the competitions, things like that. Um, Nobody was really sure what was going to happen,
Hmm.
but we heard a rumor. As a matter of fact, it was on one of the dirt sheets online. Said FCW moving to Orlando. Nobody told us.
Hmm.
Nobody said a word to Steve, me, or Norman, or anybody else. So when we called the office, let me say this: when I called the office, I said, "Hey, what's going on?" Uh, the word I got was, "Oh, don't worry about a thing. I don't know where they got that information. That's not true. We're not moving. We're staying right there in Tampa." Well, they're staying in Tampa, but I wasn't. So yeah, that was 2 weeks later when they said, "Yeah, by the way, your services are no longer needed." So I don't know how everybody else felt about the NXT thing. I thought, okay, that's cool if we're going to do it like a competition, like they did on
Hmm.
the first one with Daniel Bryan and whoever else was on there. Um, but I I would guess everybody would just buckle down and do their best.
In your opinion, what was the most successful developmental program?
Well, of course, I'm going to say FCW, and
Hmm.
anybody else is going to say OVW, and OVW was very successful. And once again, the you can anybody can put a building up,
Hmm.
put 9 rings, whatever you got, and say, okay, here's our facility.
Hmm.
But it's who you staff it with. Who are you going to put in as your coaches? Who are you going to put as your administrator? Do we just go away for a minute?
Yeah, you're
Okay.
good.
So we're good. Okay. But at the PC, you have guys like a Norman Smiley, a Dave Taylor, Fit Finley, Robbie Brookside, um, Steve Carinos and things like that. So if they can't learn there,
Hmm.
they can't learn anywhere, in my opinion. They should be able to pick up something. But they have all the tools from the gym to classrooms to video study. You can look at anything you want and figure out how you need to present yourself. And if you can't do that, well, then I don't think they belong in the wrestling business or the sports entertainment business. Let me say that.
I you know I would agree that FCW was the most successful developmental program that they did.
Well,
I,
there's some people that would agree, and some people would say Deep South. Some people say OVW. I know a couple people say HWA,
hmm
and Memphis at one time was developmental territory with a guy named Terry Golden,
hmm
in the early days. But I, having been a part of FCW, of course, I've got to keep my loyalty to Tampa.
hmm So, what are you up to today?
Well, a fellow by the name of Glenn Jacobs and I have a wrestling school in. It used to be in Knoxville. Now it's 45 minutes outside of Knoxville in La Follette, Tennessee. It's called the Jacobs Prichard Wrestling Academy, the JPWA, and we are in our fifth year doing that. Uh, so yeah, we're rolling along, man. We have this class. We do four sessions a year. I do three 12-week sessions and one 10-week session in the fall. And we have four kids from England who came over, one from France. This session, we have 12 people doing our class for the summer session. And man, it's hot. You talk about hot. I really admire these people for coming in and wanting to train, traveling all the way from England and traveling all the way from France uh, just to come over and train with us. That's pretty cool.
hmm
So we're doing that. We train 5 days a week. Glenn is the Knox County mayor as well, so he doesn't get a chance to make it by there as often as he'd like to, but he does stop by occasionally. And that's about it, man. I'm doing that. That keeps me busy, and uh, we've got a great place to train at now. It's again in La Follette, Tennessee. It's Southern Pride Championship Wrestling. They run every 2 weeks, so they give a place give our guys a place to wrestle once they graduate from JPWA.
If you had any advice to give to anybody getting into professional wrestling, what would it be? And as honest as you want to be.
Well, I believe the most important thing in wrestling, the most important thing in life, the most important thing in anything is attitude. And God knows I've had a horrible attitude before, and it takes some people longer than others to change that attitude. A bad attitude is like a flat tire; you're not going anywhere unless you change it. And I truly believe attitude. If you want to do this, you have to, I think, do some research. If you're not familiar with what wrestling is, I I have a guy right now who has only been watching wrestling for 2 years and then joined JPWA. And when I asked him why he did it, he said, "I don't know, man. It's just something about it. And I'm young enough now. I just want to try to see if I can do it." Okay, I appreciate that. It's the attitude you bring with you,
hmm
and have the right attitude going in training every day. Do it like there's no tomorrow because there may not be.
hmm
And I think without any hard work, you're not going to go anywhere. But I've seen people come in and bust their butt. Seen guys come in and tell me how bad they want this and they want to go to WWE. I've seen people make it. Then I've seen people just talk about it. You can't just talk about it. You have to make the effort. You have to go out. And there's a lot of elements people don't understand connected with the business. It's a relationship business. If they don't like you, you ain't going to be there. So you need to be likable. You need to be able to follow direction. You need to be able to decipher a lot of things too. And that comes with just getting in and being a good person and working your ass off and doing what you need to do.
hmm
But I guess the question was what?
Any advice that you'd give to anybody getting into professional wrestling?
Have a great attitude.
Yeah.
Come into it with that attitude that you're willing to do whatever it takes. Because if you're not, it'll leave you far behind.
hmm Well, I just want to thank you for your time today. Thank you for what you've done for professional wrestling and continue to do. It was an absolute honor, sir.
Well, thank you, Brian. I appreciate it.
Let's do this again sometime.
Awesome.
Thank you.